Let's begin. Good evening. I am so pleased to welcome you to the Sounds of Racism. My name is Evangeline. I am the founder and executive director of Black Mentorship, Inc., an organization dedicated to empowerment of Black professionals. We exist to elevate the personal and professional advancement of Black professionals and to build a better, more equitable workforce. The conversation we are going to have today may be difficult for some participants. However, it is a necessary conversation, one we must continue to have. As Chairman Mendez states, first, we need to calm down, breathe, and get over ourselves. As organizations, as individuals, as parents, we must come to terms with our own biasness and other negative levels if we want to establish lasting change and ensure all people, irrespective of race, thrive in the professional space. Before we begin, let us acknowledge the land that we are standing on. Halting, as we know it today, is rich in the history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the myths. From the lands of the Anishinaabe to the Atawadron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we are in solidarity with our indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors that walked before us, and all of the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We acknowledge and thank the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation for being stewards of this traditional territory. A few important elements, housekeeping rules. Please be advised, we are live on Facebook and we're recording this session. We will begin by having our panelists share their experiences with us. For questions that you would like the panelists to address, kindly use the Q&A chat box down below. You will see it there, Q&A. Kindly use that, and our web host will be working diligently to ensure that we have the questions. If you have comments too, please feel free to add that. I am humbled, I am truly, truly humbled that we have panelists who are open to bear their hearts with the hope of healing pains and perhaps being the comfort and hope for someone here today. Thank you, panelists, for being willing to share your experiences. And Deb, I applaud your willingness to learn. So thank you for being a trooper to be here today. We're just gonna go right in and introduce our wonderful panelists. I'm gonna start with Dr. Deborah Nixon. I connected with Deb in March when I reached out to her on LinkedIn and asked that she join our BMI network to mentor Black professionals. To my surprise and delight, she was already mentoring 7 professionals, one of whom was in my birth country, Nigeria. Deb's passion is trust, building, maintaining, and recovering trust after it's lost. So I am not surprised, Deb, that you are here today hoping to learn and understand Black professionals' journey. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Thanks, Evangeline. It's really great to be here. My professional background is focused in executive search and executive coaching. I mentor entrepreneurs, as Evangeline mentioned. I also have mentored Indigenous women through the Native Women's Center. So I've done a lot of that work, but really, my involvement in this area has been more recent. It started last year when I was in a book club about people who label one another. And one of the people in this book, it was a global book club that we did online. And a young man from the Netherlands talked to me about my white privilege. And I remember my reaction to that at the time was to be very outraged and defensive about me having white privilege. And that began my journey that brought me here today. So I'm here to share my perspective as somebody who's on the road to learning.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you. Ingrid Wilson. I recently connected with Ingrid. What caught me was her passion to contribute to change, the change that we need now. Her passion was so contagious, and I knew to create a better workplace where professionals thrive, we need the Ingrids of this world. Ingrid, I can't wait to hear your perspectives on the sounds of racism and what we must do as individuals. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you for inviting me, Evangeline. So my background is in human resources. I've been in human resources for more than 25 years, working with organizations, CEOs, and boards, and watching HR become a broader and more accepted role in organizations and eventually getting a seat on the table. The challenge, though, was what type of people are getting the seat at the table, the groups that were not allowed at the table. So yes, Evangeline, it was my goal to make sure that gender and race bias was addressed in anything I did through my career. And I was happy to find Deborah Nixon in March. When I was looking around at what next step would be, and watched her focus and that trust that she builds with everybody. And then we stepped into our new initiative, the HR Strategy Council, which is focused on helping HR leaders to address some of these situations, to understand racism and the other issues that are affecting our young professionals today. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Ingrid. Rishi. Rishi Badhu, did I pronounce that right?
Bandu, yeah.
Rishi has an unwavering commitment to building relationships and is an advocate and employment lawyer. With the many challenges of employer and employee relationships that we all have one time or the other, we need someone like Rishi on our team. Rishi, please take a moment and say hi to our participants.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm hoping I can share some perspective as a labor and employment lawyer. One of my core areas of practice is human rights. So I do understand, I think, human rights laws relatively well. At least I'd like to think so as they stand today, because the laws are always changing. So hopefully I can share some perspectives about that. But I think I also have some perspectives that I can share as a South Asian person. And I've had many phases in my life where I've sort of dealt with my own sort of identity issues. I can sort of identify 4 different phases of my life where I've had different realizations with respect to my own cultural identity. As a young boy, growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, I struggled with the color of my skin because none of my friends were brown. They were all white. And there was even a point where I think I unilaterally changed my name to Jason, and I ran around the neighborhood knocking on doors telling everybody, "Hi, my name is Jason." And when that story got back to my parents, they had a good chuckle at that. I then in school, I was very fortunate. I grew up in Mississauga, and I grew up in a very diverse, multiracial school. You know, my core group of friends, who I remain friends with to this day, are very diverse. They come from all parts of the world, and I think that really shaped my perspective on things. But in a way, it also put blinders on, because I wasn't seeing discrimination. It's interesting, when I entered law school and I entered professional life, that's when I started to be cognizant of the color of my skin, right? And it people are well-meaning, but you know, you start to hear jokes, you start to hear references to ethnicity and things like that, and I'm taken aback, because I'm thinking, well, how is that relevant? And you know, I'm not sensing the color of my skin in this moment. Why are you, right? So I've had to sort of struggle with that as a young lawyer coming up, and so now in this phase where I'm on my own, I've got a few years under my belt. I feel like I'm in a position where I can actually help people through these issues, whether it's as a client or as a mentor. So it's really an evolution, and I imagine there's going to be another phase of my understanding of my cultural and racial identity.
Thank you, Rishi. Marek McDonald's, he's back. Come on, guys. If you attended any one of our last, I think the last session, then I'm sure you remember Marek. Marek focuses on providing leadership and operational development and transformation. And so it is no surprise that today he is our BMI mentor. Well, Marek, without further introduction from me, please talk to our audience.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, co-panelists. I'm looking forward to the discussion. I'm here today to share the crossroads that I stand at. So as a supply chain and operations professional of over 20 years, and someone who's had frontline teams of 500 plus employees, 35 plus supervisors, two or three layers of management beneath me, and then 2 or 3 layers above me, standing there and being someone as an employee, as well as someone that hires and mentors leaders. In addition to being the president of the Supply Chain Association that I'm associated with, and closely connected with international students and members, I hear a lot of the conversations that impact people both positively and negatively. So I'm just here to share, you know, the things that I hear and the things that I've seen, and how it's impacted my career to what's got me here today, just openly and honestly. So I'm looking forward to discussion. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely. Welcome. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna get right into it. Deb, I'm gonna come to you, and I have to ask you this question. Why are you here today? As a white woman, what do you hope to achieve by partaking in a systemic racism discussion?
Well, I asked myself the same question when you first asked me, because I said, well, you know, what do I have to contribute to a panel on anti-Black racism? Because there are times when I think right now, and I think a lot of people like me kind of wonder whether it's time that we maybe should not speak, because maybe we've talked too much, and maybe I don't have anything to contribute to the conversation, because maybe I'm part of the problem. And so part of why I was happy to be here was to kind of share, I guess, the other perspective of somebody who's on this journey. And I thank Ingrid and her family for taking me through this journey. They've been my teachers. You know, as I said, when that young man talked to me about my white privilege, it was really shocking to me, because I never thought of myself that way. I don't see it. I tried to say to me, you know, well, I come from a really poor family. Like, I didn't grow up with any privilege at all. So how can you talk? I mean, I I just didn't understand it. And the whole group got really embroiled in this discussion. And it was only when Ingrid and her family talked to me about their experience that I went, oh, okay, now I get it. It's not white privilege, like I'm a white person with wealth or advantages, and I guess I am, but it wasn't the way I was thinking. It's the fact that even though I grew up in a very poor family, I still had advantages over that equivalent Black kid at the time. And I couldn't see that. And so I guess part of the reason I'm here is to kind of share that sometimes we don't understand the terms. We don't understand the meaning. We don't understand what this conversation is about. We do intellectually, but for me last year when I had that discussion, I just felt I needed to defend myself, to keep myself intact, and I couldn't be open to the conversation. I think it's really tough. And so what I'm learning is that how you approach somebody in this discussion makes all the difference. And I'm not saying that somebody should, tiptoe around it. That's not what I'm saying. But Ingrid and her family gave me the history lesson. And they talked to me about institutional barriers and systemic racism, which I had heard over the years. I just didn't really get it. And so anyway, I'm here just to share this whole movement from the perspective of the outside, I guess, looking in, and maybe part of the problem.
And believe me, Deb, you're not the only one that don't get it. Because when we think about it, racism, what is that? Ingrid, I am going to come to you and ask you this question before you share your story. Please tell our audience why we need to know what racism sounds like. Why is it important?
It's very important because it's affecting the young professionals that are coming up behind us. They don't have the mentorship to move them forward to success. And I'm not just talking about the young Black professionals or the Indigenous. The younger group, as you can see with all the marching in Black Lives Matter, they're stepping across the borders. They are bonding. They're not seeing those color lines. And now they're starting to ask, why is it that there's these color lines in the professionals and our parents? What is happening? So it needs to be addressed for them to be successful and not frustrated and move forward. We need to step up and take accountability for our lack of doing something in general about this racism. For years, many in our age group have just been coasting through, just trying to get paid for work and not ruffle any feathers. So, but it's limited opportunities for the young people behind us, and it's limiting opportunities for all of us because racism is very impactful in the workplace. So.
I hear you. I understand that. I'm thinking about what you just said. One of the most difficult feelings, to get rid of oneself is the emotional turmoil that is associated with any form of marginalization or racism. Ingrid, I'm still going to have you talk to us. Please share with everybody. Tell us, when have you or anybody that you know been denied of a professional opportunity or advancement because of aspects of their identity?
It happens all the time, especially from the HR side. We see it all the time where an individual puts up their hand for a role, or there's a promotion coming up, and that there's two people with the same skill sets who should have equal opportunities for the role, and then a manager says to you, I'm not going to give that person the role because I don't like them. And what does that mean? So how do we unpack that and break it down? And over the years, I've seen this focus on, well, I don't think that's the right person for the role because they're too aggressive, because, and generally it breaks down to the color of their skin. There's unconscious bias about this person maybe not speaking up enough or asking too many questions because they're trying to make their way through. And it's very generalized. It's more than just, you know, I don't like this individual. It's the marginalization is based on a group think. So this group of people don't work well. This group of people aren't good at math. This group of people don't speak well. And it starts to filter through and affect promotion abilities for young professionals and for other professionals who've been sitting in the same role for 20 years and watching other people go past them and get promoted. So that's the challenge, and that's the change that we're asking to happen in the workplace, to recognize those biases are affecting diversity of thought and how people develop and the success of the individuals and the organization. So.
I was wondering, as you were talking, do you know anybody that, you know, had said to you before, I know I didn't get this job? So I understand from your own perspective as HR, but do you know anybody that said to you, Ingrid, I did not get this position because of, you know?
Yeah, I had that experience during one of my careers where I was watching other people being put up for VP roles. And when I asked why I'd put in my time and hadn't been given the opportunity for the VP role, I was told, well, you have to wait 5 years. You have to put in your time. And I said to the individual, well, I've been doing this for more than 5 years, so you need to address the criteria. And it was, you know, to Deborah's point, it was kind of an awakening. It was kind of like, oh, well, you didn't put up your hand, so I assumed that you weren't interested. So I had to step up. I had to speak up and prove myself, even though I'd already done the work. Other people haven't had those opportunities. I've actually seen quite a few people leave companies I've worked at to get promoted because there was just no opportunity for them there. And that's the danger. You lose the good people that can help build the organization and move it to success because they go somewhere else where they're accepted.
So when you were confronted with that feeling, how did that make you feel?
I was angry, but you know, it was a founding CEO and he took it well and decided to step up and gave me the role. And then I saw an absolute shift in how he dealt with perceived racism over the years, that it was just not acceptable, right? So that was a good shift.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Babe, as we hear the stories, I'm going to let you, you know, come in if you have any questions, if you want to understand, because I am hoping, and you said that already, that you're going to be the voice for all white people out there that want to learn. So do you have any question, anything that you want to know from Ingrid?
Well, not from Ingrid per se, but you know, somebody had a question in the chat about what would I do? You know, now that I am aware of my white privilege. So that's like a scary kind of question, because you know, I need help, right? It's, you know, I'm trying. One of the areas, and Ingrid and I talk about this a lot, is in recruitment, which is my area of work. And so the question was, well, what would I do to change things in my organization? And in fact, one of the things I do is talk to people about their unconscious bias in the hiring process, right? When somebody comes in, I mean, everybody knows the story of, well, you weren't the right fit. Well, what does all of that really mean? And it's the number one thing that people will hear when they're rejected for a role. And so the important thing, I mean, I hear it a lot from my clients and from other people. We're very polite in Canada, so we're never going to come right out and say it, but you know that it's there. And it's a tricky conversation because nobody wants to feel accused of being racist or discriminatory, and yet you know that they are.
Mhm.
So, you know, we're just still learning how to navigate those conversations. You know, I'm learning too.
That's true. We're all learning. Marek, I'm going to come to you. You know, with everything that is going on with what Ingrid shared with us, that can make you feel belittled, you know, maybe even when you now get that position, you feel patronized. Can you help us? Can you tell us this time, you know, when you have felt not good enough and how that made you feel?
Yes, like to start by just adding on to what Ingrid was saying and just highlight something that's super important there, and that is that it's not just a one-way street where um, the negligence or the oppression or the ignorance of skill sets of minorities happens. It's the awareness from us that it is there that stops us from pursuing opportunities. And I'll give you a quick story. I took on a role and I was responsible for a very large area. So I'm touring through facilities that I have and that kind of thing. And a guy that was driving one of the forklifts on the dock approached me. And it was kind of like a side discussion. He was like, hey, let me talk to you. You know, you're the new guy, so kind of want to figure this out. But, you know, and he starts pitching me all these ideas and things he's been talking about to improve the business that he thought no one was listening to. So my question back to him was, well, who have you spoken to? His immediate response without hesitation was, look at me. Nobody's going to listen to me. I'm a big black guy, you know, like he likes to go to the gym and work out and stuff. I'm a big black guy. I'm not going to go into the front office and say anything. Like I'm just not going to fit in. So because of that thought, everything that he was saying that was actually like valid and would lend to the business, he kept inside because he thought it wouldn't be welcome elsewhere. So that's just a great point that Ingrid pointed out. And I don't want people to miss that, because if internally you have those thoughts, know that they're real and they're there, but you do have value. Someone will listen, someone, you know, it is worth sharing. Don't stop because of that. But back to your other question, Evangeline. So I'd love to share a story with you guys. You know, and I'm somebody that prides myself on hard work. You know, my grandfather, my father, my parents instilled that in me. You know, nothing beats it. Like, you know, there's no short road to it. So when I approach roles and jobs, I bring everything I have, all of the experience, you know, all the late nights, you know, all the lumps and bumps that comes with it. So I was in a position for a very large corporation, and I was responsible for actually putting a facility up from the ground up. So we were moving some facilities, and I was putting up a distribution site. And I had approached my manager at the time, and internally we had education programs. So specifically like Lean Sigma programs, green belts, and that kind of thing. So I approached and I said, listen, I know that this project is in my portfolio. Like, would you mind signing off so I could get this training? So, you know, he paddled around for 2 weeks and then came back and said, no, you know, I didn't get the approval for it. So I didn't think anything of it, because truly I did have the skill sets to like get through it, but it was an opportunity to actually get an accreditation that would have been, you know, helpful and kind of refresh my skills. So I didn't end up getting the certification at the time. And I went through with the project, put it in on time, on budget, all that stuff, no issues. His boss's boss, after the project was through, who I had a pretty good relationship with, I sat down with him, and he just out of the cuff mentioned that, oh, did you get your certification? And I said, no, it was denied. And he kind of gave me oh, okay. So I thought it was odd, because this is over a year later. So then I'm sitting now back with the original manager who I had requested it from, who didn't give it to me. And he says to me, do you remember that thing that you asked for? I denied that. He said, I'm your manager and I don't have it. What do you need it for?
Let's say that to you.
Yeah. He goes, what do you need it for? And I said, wow, like, what a grudge first thing. You know, you're holding this for a year. I had no clue that he had denied it, but for what? Then to cap things off, I hear through the grapevine and other managers and stuff that when I went into the project, my manager was saying, well, he's new in the role, he's young, so if it fails, I'm okay. Basically, I'm covered there because he's new and he's young, and leaving other parts of it out, right? But when we went in on time, on budget, didn't even show up to get the recognition plaque from head office, you know? So, you know, it was one of those things. I mean, I was disappointed by it. You know, I was frustrated. I was hurt by it because, you know, I put in 16-hour days trying to get my team through this, and knowing that this person that could have easily helped out and there was a clear path chose not to because he felt threatened. And I was glad that I was able to do it even without, but that's the experience I live. I mean, I lived through. And what it taught me was, you know, again, I opened with it. It's the hard work. You know, you don't think about it in the moment, but that was my insurance for that time. Because of the things I had done, I was able to pull myself through. If every step of the way you lean on someone to give you a handout or give you an easy road in, then that is how you find success. And of course, you know, people find it across the board, but I really would have been down and out had I not had the amount of hard work I had prior to. So that's my story.
Thank you so much for sharing that. My God. I can't even imagine, you know, in the two examples, both you and Ingrid, bravo, you spoke up. You know, when you found out, you went back. And Ingrid, there's so many people that don't have that courage to go back, that sit on it and blame themselves and internalize it. And, you know, the ripple effect continues to happen. I know I talk to my boys about hard work. But I also feel guilty sometimes because I talk to them about doing 200%. When I say to them, I say, you need to do 200%. And I know that you are, white peers are doing 70% or sometimes 80 or 100, right? So Rishi, I am going to come to you in this both experiences, they both spoke up, which is good. What do you think people should know when faced with similar experiences? How can they empower themselves, you know, to continue speaking up?
It's a good question, and I think the one theme that's coming through, Merrick spoke about this, you echoed it, and it's something that you know, my mentors have always told me, my father always told me, and that is, you know, as a racialized person, you have to work harder than the next person to get by, and that's the basic truth. And I think the corollary to that is the margin for error for us as racialized people in the workplace is a lot thinner than it is going to be for others, right? You know, for me, for example, you know, going into law, my parents were first generation immigrants to the country. I didn't have connections in law. I didn't have connections to Bay Street. My parents didn't, you know, rub shoulders with professionals, with lawyers, with judges, that sort of thing. So there's a whole culture around that, and there's a whole language around it that I didn't understand, right? And that you can't understand until you live it and until you learn it, right? So as a result of that, I and others have to be that much better in order to succeed within the traditional avenues of success, which for law would be succeeding on Bay Street, right? You have to be better. You have to be better, and you have to make fewer mistakes, and you have to not rattle the chain, right? As much as others. You just don't have, unfortunately, we just don't have the freedom to be completely ourselves or to completely speak up in the workplace, because you're just not going to be afforded that flexibility, right? That's just the reality, unfortunately. Now, are things changing? Yeah, I think they are. I think that we are starting to recognize that there are these implicit biases that we're not aware of, and we have to have active policies in place in the workplace to recognize it, and people have to be made to feel comfortable to come forward and to speak about it. So I think my advice is if you're a racialized person, you're entering into the workforce, you're establishing your career, you know, as much as you can, find an organization that aligns with your values and that you feel like you're going to be comfortable in. I think we have to acknowledge that we have these challenges, and we need to look at organizations that have policies in place and that aren't just going to pay lip service to diversity, such that if there is an issue, if a joke is made, there's a comfort level in speaking about it, right? That's critically important. You know, I remember one time at a previous organization, we were on a retreat somewhere, and you know, alcohol gets consumed, and when alcohol gets consumed, inappropriate things are said, and inappropriate things were said to me about my racial identity, and it was one of those things where we're all having fun, something is said, and I'm like, what? Where did that come from, right? Like, thanks for alienating me. Now, this was probably 15 years ago. And I didn't feel comfortable speaking about that. I didn't feel comfortable after the fact saying that was wrong. It shouldn't happen again, right? And that's simply because of the culture of the environment that I was part of, right? And so I think that people need to select, and we need to have the courage, frankly, of looking at organizations that value diversity, value inclusion, and want to hear from employees about these types of issues so that they can be remedied.
Well said. Yeah, you touched a whole lot of areas that I actually want us to go into. We dealt with this in last session that we had, but I find that in every topic, finding your voice is very critical, is very important. And it's often very hard to be able to air yourself or, you know, voice out if you are that lone face, if you're that only minority at work. It's a lot of pressure. Marek, how do you suggest, you know, we find our voice?
Oh, yeah, Rishi brought up some good stuff there. You know, it puts us in such a tough spot because, you know, looking for the next step and wanting to be able to contribute and looking for signals within our organizations and our groups on, you know, what does success look like? Like, what path should I follow here? We're looking for any beacon in the dark. So while we're receiving that, at the same time, we're being conscious of how we're being viewed and how our every move and action is being criticized and, you know, judged, and how it's going to be played against us. So, you know, we're trying to move and stay still at the same time. You know, I can share an example with you. I mentioned I'm the president of the Supply Chain Association. It's international, so we have a lot of conferences. And one of the earlier conferences I went to, and I didn't even realize this until it was mentioned to me, but it's all presidents from chapters across North America, and I'm sitting there, and the lady next to me tasked me. She says, "Hey, how come there are not more young Black people in supply chain?" And I thought, "Oh, I'm just eating my salad here. Like, this is where did this come from? Like, now I have to speak for everyone, right?" But I raised my head and I looked around the room, and the only other Black person that was in there was the AV guy that was set up the room for the speakers. And it really dawned on me. I said, "Holy!" I mean, you know, I used this term before, but I'm sitting there like a raisin in oatmeal, and I didn't know what to say. I mean, because I hadn't had a chance to, you know, survey the community or ask people. But the answer that I gave and what I could at the time was, it's opportunity. you know, it's not widely open to say, hey, come on, join these executive ranks. Hey, come on in. This is how you get through. But then I internalized and I said, you know, how did I get here? And it was just through continuous interest in self-development. Every step of the way, being able to be honest with myself and say, you know, I'm not a perfectionist. I don't know it all, but I'm here to learn, and just being honest. And it's every interaction that came through, showing up that way. I was able to be successful in some sense. But like Rishi pointed out, you know, even if an organization has the writing on the wall and the mantras, you will encounter those individuals that have different thoughts about it. You know, so how do you not let those relationships impact your success? And it's tough when they become direct reports. I'll share a quick story with you. I took on a new facility, and I was walking through, and this guy approaches me and he goes to give me a fist bump. And he said something like, hey, what's up, homeboy? And now I'm the director for the facility. You know, there's 1,000 people that work on a 24-hour shift. And I turned to the guy that was touring me through and I said, why did he do that? You know, like we didn't have that relationship. We're in a professional environment where culturally, you know, we're not hanging out shooting dice on the corner or anything like I don't present myself that way. The response that I got back was, well, you know, he probably felt uncomfortable because of how I present myself and the title that I had. So to make him feel comfortable, he would play this role with me. Again, confusing, and he was projecting onto me, I guess, what he wanted me to do to be able to make him feel comfortable. So again, to Richie's point, you know, you encounter these individuals, but you know, I just kept it moving. I didn't engage the way that he wanted, and he looked a little bit thrown off by it. But again, staying focused on what I'm there to do and always being professional. And like everyone has pointed out, not giving anyone a reason to criticize me. I mean, you have critics, but not outwardly, you know, not using foul language and being loose and being unprofessional or anything like that. I've got to be on pins and needles and sharp as a tack every minute of the day that I'm in a professional environment, because people are looking to say, see, I told you it wasn't professional. You know, had I given that back, then I would have been the topic of discussion. So just being conscious, you know, the discussion that we're here talking about the sounds of racism, but it's you're not always going to hear it. You know, it's more you're going to see it and you're going to feel it. Sometimes when things don't add up, when people aren't giving you straight answers, when you're asking straight questions, it's a red flag, you know? So just be aware of that and staying true to what you know in terms of being professional and following your path.
Wow, that was heavy. That was a lot. But I'm gonna ask, and Deb, I will come to you. Do you think that perhaps marriage missed an opportunity to educate this individual, to let this person understand that wasn't right? And I'm thinking about unconscious bias, because let me be nice and say perhaps this person don't understand what they're doing, right? Can you talk to us about that?
So I'm not sure about that, because, you know, there's time and place and there's other people may not have been appropriate, but I'll share a story with you. A really good colleague of mine ran a training session for a client of mine. So I was doing some work with this client, and they were talking about having these guys on the floor who were, you know, there for 30 years, older white guys, who were not liking the younger guys that were coming on because they were brown and black. And so there was this great divide being created there with these very experienced white guys not really wanting to connect with these other new people. And she talked about this one supervisor that I actually know quite well. And he was one of the 25-year plus people, but he happened to be a black man. He was the only one. And in this session that she was doing on trying to bring these groups together and a little bit of diversity, this guy for the first time in 20 years told his peers how he felt about the fact that for 20 years they had called him darky. And, you know, I guess probably along the way, he probably just laughed it off, or, you know, because he had to work with these people all the time. But, you know, can you imagine going into that workplace every day and hearing that and never saying anything? And so, should he have said something 20 years ago? I'm not sure. I'll bet you if he had said something 20 years ago, it would not have gone well for him. He would have been ostracized. They would have talked about him. And he probably would have been driven out of that place. But times have changed. I don't know what sparked this now. You know, for the first time in many years, the organization actually approached this issue. It's not a new issue. So I guess my answer to your question is, you know, not everybody, it's hard to educate people. So there's a way to do it. There's a time and a place. You know, I think that young man last year tried to educate me, but it wasn't working. I couldn't hear. Ingrid and her family educated me, but I don't know, I was in a different place. Maybe I was more open. I don't know. Immediately when that young guy talked to me, he labeled me. And the book that we were studying was called Don't Label Me. And it made me realize how destructive any kind of label can be. Because the minute you label anybody, anything, people's immediate reaction is to defend themselves because you've threatened their sense of self. And our instinctive reaction is to turn inward and protect ourselves. And so I guess, you know, I'm open to being educated. Definitely. I would say I'm probably not open to being labeled. Neither is anybody else wanting to be labeled, right? So I tell people when you do this, you have to do it with empathy, not with shame. You have to approach with some kindness that you're there to help the person and let them know that.
Thank you for that. These days, it's so common to anywhere you look, you see organizations, industries, you know, stating their commitment to the Black community. You know, I have heard so much about it, and it makes me start wondering and start thinking, what do Black professionals want? What do we want? And Ingrid or Marek, feel free to jump in on this one.
So I'm just going to say that a lot of us, at least the older crew, and some of the young, are standing back. I've watched my kids in their 30s and the granddaughter, 11, trying to figure out if this is real. And I watched them going out and marching across the world, the young people, because they're basically saying they're not prepared to wait as we did to see it change, right? And our challenge right now as older professionals is that we can't give them that comfort that it's actually going to change. I saw somebody put in the chat the question as to what, it was basically a statement that all these changes and discussions have actually come to the forefront because of George Floyd. So I'm going to say George Floyd was the last straw. This has been hundreds and hundreds of years of dealing with this. So this is not new to us. You know, every time slavery was abolished somewhere, somebody else went behind the scenes and put in other laws to demean us, like Jim Crow's laws. There's so many occasions where young Black people, old Black people, everybody, we know there's certain things we can't do, to Merrick's point, certain things you can't say. When do you say this? When do you not say this? And it's even more challenging when you are a racialized woman, because the men have a little bit more leeway, because there's this, if we speak to the men the wrong way, they're going to be aggressive. If you speak to the women, then you can bully them and they're not going to say anything. Well, Merrick said he behaves and he's professional and he doesn't swear. Well, I'm going to tell you, to get where I got to, yeah, I had to step up, right? And, you know, Deborah tells me that I have a lot of confidence, but it was learned to protect myself. It was, you're going to tell me I can't do this job. I'm going to work harder to do it. I'm going to present better, and I can swear better than all of you in the room. Okay? Because I had to hold my own in an all male white world. Not everybody can do that. It takes a lot of resilience. It also takes a point when you know that, to Merrick's point, you have to step back. So yeah, none of this is new. And I hope it's going to change, but we're waiting.
Marek, do you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, just to add to it, I mean, you know, I think more than anything, just equality, like this is what we're talking about, is equality, just a fair shake, knowing that the things that we offer hold the same value as anyone else with the same set of skills. You know, to know that we are being compensated the same as someone else doing the same role as us. And then, of course, the opportunities. And not just, you know, yes, there's a posting on Indeed, go have a look. But real discussions about, hey, I see the value, I see what you contribute to the team. You know, this is career progression. This is what I see for you. You know, we've talked about it before. It's not, you know, many times it's not that. We don't hear about them. You know, people come sliding into roles and we're like, hey, I've been sitting here, you know, typing away, thinking I'm doing a great job, waiting to get the tap, and it just never comes. So equal opportunity in terms of visibility to what is happening and knowing what's around the corner and what's coming. And then the fair shake at, hey, you know, I'm bringing this bag of apples, someone else is bringing this bag of apples. We're both going to get $5 for them, you know, and let the best man or woman win in terms of a competition and how you present. So really just, you know, sum it up, just equality.
That's a good one. And while you were speaking, I saw somebody's comment flashed. Somebody said men get bullied as well. I completely agree. I've had stories. And Rishi, talk to us. We want self-development. We want to continue learning. How do we create a story that tells your minority friends, you know, call up friends of why you want to understand their experience?
In what context? Can you clarify?
So you have your minority friends, right?
Yeah.
You are minority yourself, your Black friends, and you want to be able to say to them and also to our white allies, you want to say, okay, this is what you can say to make both parties know that you understand their experience without, you know, seeming so patronizing.
Right. I think what's important is to recognize is that people don't see themselves as discriminatory or racist in the moment. They really don't. And it's, we see it, we feel it. You know, I have felt those comments, right? But when someone is speaking to me, it's and making these types of comments, it's, you know, the feeling is just joking. We're just joking around, right? And you don't want to say anything because you don't want to look like the troublemaker. You don't want to look like the rabble rouser, right? But on the other hand, it's so important and critical to speak your mind, right? And it's so, you have to have courage. You have to have, if change is going to happen, racialized people have to have courage in the workplace. They have to be willing to speak. And, you know, hopefully the organizations are going to be willing to listen, right? And I think that what we have to do, what we have to learn, first, we have that courage, but secondly, we've got to be able to to talk about our story, tell us what hurts us, tell us what offends us, in a way that's not personal, that's not hurtful, despite the fact that we feel that hurt, right? Because the people making these comments are making us feel undermined. They're not intending on doing that. They're not bad people, right? They've learned a certain pattern of behavior that they think is funny or humorous, and it's just ignorance at the end of the day, right? It's not malice. So I think we have to number one, have courage. Number two, we have to have empathy and compassion within ourselves, to be able to address these things, and to hopefully fix it, not only for ourselves but for everybody else. And that's a tall order. It really is, and it comes back to, you know, the fact that we have to be better. We have to be better. We have to be courageous. We have to be empathic. But you know, organizations also have to have those processes in place. Let me just go on a bit of a tangent here. One of my practice areas is workplace investigations, and I had a bit of a breakthrough recently. I was investigating a complaint of bullying and harassment, and you know, from a legal perspective, when we look at bullying and harassment, we see things in black and white, right? Bullying and harassment is, you've been sworn at, you've been yelled at, someone is speaking in your face. It's really serious stuff, and it almost allows the person to walk out and sue the organization. So we tend to see those things in an all or nothing way. But I think the legal community now is evolving, and I hope our courts are going to follow suit, such that bullying and harassment isn't always that serious and isn't always that black and white. And there are such things as microaggressions, right? Comments, small comments, which in and of themselves may not be harmful, but when you add them up over time, it becomes very serious, right? And we're seeing people now, 10, 15 years later, they're complaining about their treatment in the workplace, and it's because of all these microaggressions and the cumulative effect of those, right? So I think our workplaces are starting to acknowledge that, and so I'm hopeful that you know, as employees, we can now have the confidence and the courage to speak about these microaggressions so that they get nipped in the bud, and they're not just simply looked at as it's no big deal, or you're just being too sensitive.
Absolutely. There's no two ways around it. We need courage, and we need to speak up.
Can I say something, Evangeline?
Sure.
I think it's really important for people to try and find allies. And I think of all the organizations I had worked in, I wish somebody had asked me to be an ally. I wish somebody had come up to me and said, this is happening to me and I can't deal with it, and will you help me? I think sometimes somebody had asked on the chat, you know, now that I know all this, you know, what am I going to, you know, was I aware that there were so few Blacks and racialized people in senior levels? Of course I was aware. Of course. How could I not be aware? Just as a woman, I would be aware, sensitive to that, because it's a women's issue back in the 60s. And by the way, it's still a big problem. So we know that these things, these powerful groups will work very hard to hang on. But you know, I think people need to find people who are willing to listen. Somebody had said, well, what if you're not from a culture where you can speak up? And I totally get it. As I was teaching at the university with a lot of students from India, and they're very, very respectful of their professors, and they would never contradict you. And so it's difficult for people like that when you want to be challenged. And so I think there have to be allies in the organization who will be the voice, who will kind of take the lead on that. And I think people have to look for those people.
Sure. Ingrid wants to say something. Before that, let me ask you, Deb, so that ally that you speak of, is it different from HR?
In fact, and I know it's easier said than done, Vanessa, I get it. Because I've been bullied in the workplace too, right? And sometimes you're very alone. But no, it doesn't have to be HR. It's just got to be somebody somebody who will have your back and somebody who will be there for you and somebody who can help you.
Ingrid, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Deb said, because, you know, most people think, okay, HR should be there to help, and there's laws around why HR should be helping. But what Rishi was talking about is psychological harassment. It just builds and builds. These microaggressions build up to a point where somebody can't take anymore, right? And the challenge is that you feel very alone unless there's somebody else in that hallway who's going to step forward and say, I've noticed what's happening and I want to help you, right? And the challenge is, how do you get that person to step forward? First of all, the people that are being bullied and harassed, they need to speak up. They need to speak up to their peers. If it's a supervisor who's harassing them, they need to go to HR, but they need to speak up. Otherwise, people are going to assume that they're going to manage this and they're going to do it on their own, and or it's not bothering them. They're just going to keep going. Because in my career, I've had situations where somebody else has actually shown up in my office to complain about the treatment that they see another supervisor is giving very bad treatment to somebody else, but we can't get that other person step up, right? And when you're doing an investigation, if you can't get that person to come forward, it's a challenge, right? Especially when it's coming from a supervisor in a place of power. Yeah, so having a safe place to speak. HR people, if there are any HR people on this call, people, you need to step up, because it is no longer okay to say, I'm just going to go along with this, right? The organizations, the HR people, the leaders, the mentors, we all have to recognize that this is happening and it needs to be addressed.
Awesome. Let's quickly look at some of the questions that we have here. And what I've noticed, people are putting questions in chat and in the Q&A. So let's address the ones in the Q&A, and let's see if we can go through this fast. Deborah, somebody is asking, now that your white privilege is front and center, what do you specifically and intentionally want to do to help disrupt inequity within your particular organization? Not tokenistic actions. What transformative actions will you take to ensure that the marginalized and comfortably included at your decision-making tables? I don't know if you see that. That's from Ekwe Odozo.
Yeah, so that's such a tall order to ask of one person. You know, what I try to do with the work that I do is, you know, first of all, not to be a bystander. And so to build on what Ingrid was talking about, I think it's people like me or anybody else to not be silent when we see things happening. The other piece is to call out the behavior that I see. I mean, I'm in executive search, so one of the places that I can always do that is to try and educate my clients and my colleagues around our hiring and interviewing practices. How are we screening people in? How are we screening people out? On what basis are we judging people? And also to be super aware of the unconscious bias within us, because that comes out a lot in the recruitment process. It's the first step in for anybody into an organization, is that first interview. And that first interview is very fraught with the unconscious bias comes out a lot. We all have unconscious bias about all kinds of things. And we build them into that interview process. And that's how we decide you're in or you're out. You fit or you don't. And I think that we as individuals have to be very, very honest with ourselves. And it's okay to have unconscious bias. That's how we get through the world. But we have to be careful when we use it to navigate and make sense of the world, and when we use it to keep people out.
Thank you about that. Another question: how can one stand up against injustice if coming from a superior? Anybody feel free.
Yeah, I don't mind. And I'm gonna, because I saw another one in there, and someone asked, so I'm gonna try to answer both at the same time.
Mhm.
Asked how, Merritt, please tell us how your life would have been different, especially seeing that you have advanced in your career. So that one, and
Mhm.
how can you stand up against injustice from a superior? And this is one thing that I want people to keep in mind. The world is a very small but large place. You know, we get stuck in our roles and in our companies, and we get absorbed by the culture and the people we see day in and day out. It's not fair, but sometimes you just got to move on. And I'll share an example. Early on, when actually, it was the very first supervisor job I was applying for. Um, there was at this point I had done every role inside the warehouse. I drove every forklift, I did receiving, put away, loading, swept, everything. And then I went into the office and I was doing all the admin work, so dispatching work, giving work to the floor. There was I would say a peer of mine who only worked on the night shift and only did the receiving. We had both applied for the supervisor job, and he was Caucasian, I'm me, and I was told the reason they said that they gave it to him was that he was older than me and more mature. They said, well, you know what? He's married, he has a house, and so that's the reason. And I said, but it makes no sense. I have 5 times the experience as him. And that was the reason they gave me. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to sit and wait for you guys to say that I'm ready. I know that I am. And I left. Um, it's unfortunate, but you know, had I accepted what was given to me, who knows? I'd probably be still waiting to get off afternoon shift there. Um, so I know you want to be successful where you are, and I know you want to play by the rules of the board game you're standing on, but there are other environments that are welcoming. There are other places where what you have to offer will accelerate you and people will see the value. The funny thing was, I left that facility, but I stayed within the company. And literally like 2 weeks after that, I applied for a supervisor job, same company, a different facility. And all of the experience that I had, the guy that was interviewing me, who was a Caucasian guy, um, it resonated with him because he understood. So when I told him about certain positions that I had, he goes, oh man, yeah, that's crazy, because people just come up to you, you never know what your work's going to be, you know, and we're having a great discussion about it, but he acknowledged the work. So don't get stuck in where you are. If you don't like the rules of the game, change the board. And that is what people have to sometimes accept. You know, I know we don't want to, because you've made a little bit of distance on where you are and a little bit of success, but sometimes the game's over. Pack up and go where you're going to feel appreciated and feel valued.
I like that. Sometimes the game is over and you need to realize the game is over. I have another question here from Michelle. Is saying it's obvious that real discussions, started happening after George Floyd. Have you witnessed and experienced changes in your organization? If so, what accountability action plan, what do you think? Anybody can take it. What are the key indicators that show you that there is change or changes coming?
Well, I mean, there's been some really important changes in the law in the past couple of years. In the provincial sector, the Occupational Health and Safety Act was amended to include definitions of bullying and harassment and requirements to investigate allegations within the workplace. And so, a lot of employment lawyers, myself included, our practice areas in terms of doing investigations have exploded, right? And I'll be completely honest with you. A lot of times the complaints are unsubstantiated. A lot of them are frivolous, but on the other hand, it is an indication that more people are complaining and more people feel comfortable to complain. And I think the reason is because within the legislation itself, there's protections from reprisals for making such complaints. So people can make these complaints with some degree of comfort, knowing that they're not going to suffer consequences, right? So, and I think that change is going to continue to happen. People are going to feel more comfortable bringing forward these types of complaints. You know, typically we haven't seen a lot. I haven't seen a lot of racial discrimination complaints in the workplace because I think they're just so difficult to prove, right? And I always tell my clients this whenever they come to see me. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And most of the time, you can't prove it. You can't prove an allegation, right? So you have to let it go, right? But I think with the changes that we're seeing, there's certainly an awakening. The incident with George Floyd has definitely sparked an awareness and an awakening in people, and I think that we're going to see more and more people come forward with these types of allegations.
Thank you, Rishi. Let me just throw this out, panelists. If you see a question in the chat that you want to address, please let me know so that we can get that immediately, okay? I have one question. How do you ask someone to be an ally? And Deb, I think this is for you. What would you be comfortable with a racialized person asking you in terms of the action to demonstrate that allyship, Deborah?
Yeah, so whatever it is they felt that they needed from me, I don't find it that hard to be an ally. I don't want to be a bystander. I totally do not want to be a bystander. And all these stories I'm hearing bother me a lot because I think back to years past and was I a bystander? You know, I started my career in the late 70s when women were very, very badly treated. And I have horror stories of situations that I found myself in, very alone, very frightened by men who were clients and no support. So I know what it's like to be all by yourself. So I want somebody to just come to me and tell me what they need from me. Just tell me what you need. Do you need me to go with you to somebody? Do you need me to speak up for you? Do you need me to support you in a meeting? Like, tell me what you need and I will find a way to help.
So be specific.
Yeah, because if, you know, I won't know what will be helpful to you. And I don't want to be patronizing and assume, oh yes, here I am, I'm going to save you and rescue you. That is not what this is about. This is about helping you to step out on your own. And if I can help you be strong, then tell me how I can help you.
Awesome. Another question coming from Alicia. Can the panelists speak about their experiences or their experience finding allies among other racialized colleagues in the workplace? I have found that there seems to be a push towards competition or the idea that there's only one room for me, which is equally as discouraging and emotionally exhausting. So anybody can take this.
Yeah, the challenge is that the companies have been shifting towards pushing people to produce, that drive for profits, and as part of it, all the people skills, all the people issues are pushed underneath. So and it takes away from that team and collaboration because you're always climbing over everybody else to get something done. So it doesn't give you that opportunity to really go and speak to somebody that's beside you in your team, because you may be competing with that person for something, in, you know, a bonus, etc. So it makes it challenging. And I think the companies need to step back and realize that these kind of profit production pushes need to turn back and look at the people issues, look at the people and put people first, respect people, and understand that once you just, I mean, the main thing is when we went into COVID and everybody went home, they basically sent people home. They didn't think about what was impacting people when they went home. All these issues that they were experiencing at work now blending into work-life balance. How is HR going to deal with the people issues, right? So it made it even harder for people to reach out to teams around them when the company is still saying, we know you're home, but you need to get the money in, you need to get the work in. So to find allies, unfortunately, HR, the leaders have to step up. They have to ask people, their teams, as Merrick said, ask their teams how they're feeling. Is there anything that needs to happen? They need to have the individual conversation with their people. They need to have the team conversations. There's the individual conversation with your direct reports is very, very important, because you will start bringing out those issues that are happening, right? And to Rishi's point, one of the things that I've seen that's changing, social network. If people are not comfortable telling somebody in the office that they're being harassed, they're going to put it on the social network. And that's what's shifting that change. That's what shifted with George Floyd, because it was out there and people started spreading it, right? So those are the changes that we're starting to see, why this is still rolling forwards. Every time you put something out there about systemic racism, people respond. So
That's a good one. I have one question from Andrew. There's a couple of them, but let's talk about this. If you cannot prove racist behavior in the workplace, and I'm thinking, Rishi, this is for you, then how do we support culture change to make this unacceptable behavior maybe go away? Anybody can take this really, but yeah. If we can prove it, you're mute, Rishi.
It's a very good question, and I think we need a breakthrough case, right? We need a decision from the Human Rights Tribunal or from the courts, and we need a courageous plaintiff to take forward that case to establish that they were a victim of racist treatment, and the treatment is not the conventional racist treatment that we think of, right? It is these microaggressions. It is these exclusions. It's the lack of eye contact. It's all these sorts of small things that add up to something bigger, right? And it's just very difficult to get there, right? Again, what we know in our gut doesn't translate well in a hearing room or in a court, right? But I think that one of these days, one of those cases is going to come out, and it's going to spark and cause even more change.
Can I add to that too, if you don't mind? Oh, sorry, Merrick.
No, you go ahead, please.
Okay. I think to add to that, because the person asked about culture change, everybody knows when it's happening. So even though you can't prove it, everybody knows that it's there. And I think at that point, it takes really courageous leadership to push that change through. And I think without courageous leadership, you won't get culture change through an organization, because it'll stop at a certain point.
Mary,
Yeah, yeah, some great points, guys. And I want to tie it just back to the question about the ally, and exactly to Rishi's point. It's not going to be on a billboard. You got to kind of play in between the seams and read in between the lines. But that's kind of where I've used allies in I guess my past and even currently, more than being having someone to speak up for me. Just have someone to do kind of a quality check or an audit. Like, if we're in a boardroom situation, is the VP talking to you the same way they're talking to me? In tone, in diction, are they cutting me off and giving you the room to speak? Do your ideals get more distance than mine do? But again, it's not going to be on a billboard. So you kind of pick it out and see it there. But that's how I use the allies, people that I respect the work that they do. We both have the same passion for the jobs we're in, and not outwardly planning to do it, but just being aware of the different reception when we are both given the same discussion, and then just seeing where to what play I'm going to make from there. But that's how I would use it. But great points, guys.
Yeah, great points, everybody. Thank you so much. I have, I think, what actions can one take if they witness a racist or systemic behavior?
Report it.
Absolutely. Report it. Don't wait.
Yep.
I like that quick one. Just scanning through. Somebody wrote something around, if you know, like as an HR person, if you have, if you're the one experiencing the microaggression or the racist behavior, who do you go to?
Yeah, I just responded to the
Oh, you did?
person. Yeah, but that is challenging. So honestly, if you feel that this is the company that you're going to continue with as HR, then you need to have a discussion with the individual who's behaving that way, and tell them as professionally as possible how it's impacting you. And if it continues, and again, you still want to continue with this company, then you need to put your concerns in writing and send it to the senior leadership team. Mm-hmm. But that takes a lot of courage and to take that step, especially when you're in HR, and especially if it's your HR leader who's doing so. And to Merrick's point, you need to sit down and have a personal discussion with yourself about whether this is a company you need to continue with, because there are other companies out there that respect people.
Absolutely.
Can I just add to that as well? And also, great point, Ingrid. And also, I would just add, be very specific if you're going to address or confront someone about unwanted behavior. A lot of times emotion gets involved, and other things can easily fall into the wagon on the discussion. Mm-hmm. Leave those out, and be very direct. And Rishi pointed out earlier, don't make it an attack, but hey, I'm not sure why this happened, but I don't like this. I don't like that you said this. Mm-hmm. Adding how you made it feel can easily put the shoe on the other foot for them, and just say, hey, how would you feel if I said this? Maybe give them something to think about. I'm not mad at you. I'm not upset. I just want you to be clear. I don't want to hear that from you moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you just let them go with it. They'll probably take it, with a bit of a shock factor, but when they settle in, if there's someone that is respectful and professional and wants to have a professional relationship with you, then they'll synthesize it and, adjust themselves accordingly. If there's someone that is trying to be malice, then, you're not going to hear from them again. Peggy just said, easier said than done. Absolutely it is. I agree 100%. But I can tell you this, Peggy, and for everyone, just as I kind of role played it here, it's taken me 22 years to get to this. Managing people, having tough conversations, swallowing that lump in my throat, but starting with, hey, I don't like this. Kids have no problem doing it. My 3 and 5-year-old have no problem telling me what they don't like. So it's in us. We all have it. Set the fear aside and understand that your personal comfort is more important than someone getting a laugh or them feeling comfortable by putting you down.
Yeah. I have to chip in there and say that oftentimes it's not that these people that take it, that keep quiet, is not because they can't speak up. This is their livelihood. They don't want to lose their job because bills got to be paid, right? So you see us taking it and swallowing it and keeping quiet. But like you said, it takes practice. The way that I look at it personally is you have to weigh your options. mental health, your personal health. So yes, it's easier said than done, but yes, we have to continue practicing, speaking up. The long run, I think we are better for it. I have one question, that we can take in, and it's from Lola. My question is specifically regarding Black immigrant women who most times feel like they are at the bottom of the totem pool and blessed to be sitting at these tables. How can we handle these situations confidently without jeopardizing our careers? Speaks to what we just talked about. Anybody feel free to jump in.
It's very tough, especially if you're a woman and an immigrant. There's, I saw the comments about men are bullied too, but women have a double whammy when you're an immigrant. There's this some implicit bias that these women can't speak up for themselves. So unfortunately, it requires somebody in an organization stepping up and mentoring and helping these women to move forward. Because if it's one woman in a situation, in an organization, I can see how very, very difficult it will be for them to step up and say something. So that's why it's really, really important to see those mentors start coming forward, because that's a challenge right now. A lot of women, a lot of racialized groups aren't seeing those professionals and mentors up there ahead of them that make the organization look like something they want to be, a culture they want to be working in. So that's why we need to start really focusing on those mentorships and helping the people around us that need help. Exactly. Time to step up.
I agree with you on that one. You mentioned mentorship, right?
Yeah. And it's time, if I can add, it's really time for organizations to get organized about the mentorship, because often mentorship is left up to the mentee to go out and search for one, or an organization assigns a mentor, which, they need to have programs where they recognize the vulnerability of certain groups of people within the organization and make sure that they have somebody whose role it is to help them navigate through the organization and to help them move ahead in it, which is your work, Evangeline.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I'm looking at the time, and I really will want each, if we can kind of 1 second or 2 seconds to just say, call to action. What do we want people to do? Rich?
Be brave, have courage, and stand up for injustice where you see it, for yourself and for your colleagues.
Thank you. Ingrid?
I would like to see more support within our culture for each other, for us to step up and get something done.
Marek?
Yes, and this is going to tie off what Peggy was saying, and kind of wrap up the conversation. These things that we encounter are at the mercy of the provider's time, right? So the people that make the comments, that do the actions to make certain people feel ways, it's on their time. In response for you to, feel confident and respond, use your time. It doesn't have to be an immediate altercation where you set the place on fire and start butting heads. In the moment, if you're not prepared to respond, take time. And when you feel comfortable, then you come back and you have the conversation. And that will make it easier done than said.
Thank you. Deb?
So find an ally and offer to be an ally. I think people can be allies. And so we have to step up and take our responsibility and be the ally in the organization.
Hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been so awesome. Have you felt or have you experienced any of the things that our panelists shared with us today? Have you thought yourself to be invisible? Have you felt that emotion? Have you felt, I don't have a voice? Well, I hope that after this session, you know you matter equally. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You are enough. We are enough. I encourage you, be resilient in a positive way. Be the driving force of the change you want to see. Like the great man John Lewis said, when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up. You have to say something. You have to do something. To all of our wonderful panelists, thank you so much for letting the world see your heart. Your inspiration this evening, I'm sure will benefit all of us for a very long time. All of you amazing people, my goodness, thank you so much for making this session very interactive. Thank you for your comments, your questions. On behalf of our BMI team, we thank you. We have the second part of this discussion coming up September 10. Stay tuned for all the details. Until then, friends, let's make good trouble. This is your moderator, Evangeline Chima. Thank you so much and stay safe.
Thank you, Evangeline, for moderating.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Good night.